Meanwhile, the Gulf Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, interestingly, is building its own ballistic missiles, and it is China that seems to have transferred the missile technology to the Gulf power. The report has also revealed the Desert Kingdom's growing missile ambitions, and this has been first published by an American media outlet. Satellite images that have been accessed by the American media show that Saudi Arabia is now actively manufacturing its own ballistic missiles with the help of China. Now, Saudi Arabia has never been able to build its own ballistic missiles so far, and the regional power has been purchasing ballistic missiles from China. The latest images from the kingdom suggest that manufacturing of weapons by the Saudi kingdom is underway in at least about one location. The site was previously constructed with Chinese assistance.
Latest news headliner: Saudi Arabia appears to be building its own ballistic missiles with China's help. NBC News, dated December 25th, 2021. Saudi Arabia is building its own ballistic missiles with the help of China, according to U.S. intelligence assessments and satellite imagery. The assessment of U.S. intelligence agencies is that the kingdom, which is long thought to have acquired missiles from Beijing, is now manufacturing its own, according to a source familiar with the matter and a U.S. official. Satellite images obtained by NBC News also suggest that Saudi Arabia is producing ballistic missiles at a site west of the capital in Riyadh, according to researchers at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey. James Martin wrote, along with Jeffrey Lewis and David Schmeier at the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies at the Middlebury Institute, quote, "The key piece of evidence is that the facility is operating a burn pit to dispose of solid propellant left over from the production of ballistic missiles," end quote. The news was first reported by CNN on Thursday. The images were provided by commercial imaging company Planet Labs PBC. The development could shift security cancellations and calculations in the Middle East, further complicate the Biden administration's effort to coax Iran back into its nuclear deal with world powers. It could also add another layer of complexity to Washington's relations with Beijing. Iran and Saudi Arabia are regional foes, and there will be concern that Riyadh's manufacturing of ballistic missiles could alter Tehran's calculations on its possible agreements and talks aimed at reviving the 2015 accord. The new development comes days before the talks, which have struggled to make any headway, are expected to resume in Vienna and may make Iran even more unlikely to give up its own ballistic missiles. Mark Fitzpatrick, an associate fellow at the London-based International Institute for Strategic Studies, said about Saudi Arabia's ballistic missile program, "If Iran were to enter into negotiations over its missile program, it would be unlikely to accept limits that did not also apply to other countries." Fitzpatrick, a former State Department official, said at the time that other than a general desire to keep peace with Iran, Riyadh's motivations for acquiring ballistic missiles were not entirely clear. Unlike Tehran, however, Saudi Arabia is not known to have initiated any work to develop a nuclear warhead for its missiles, he added. Ballistic missiles are rocket-propelled weapons that can carry conventional explosives as well as nuclear warheads. Nevertheless, the fact that Saudi Arabia is now known to be manufacturing its own ballistic missiles will spark concerns of a ramped-up arms race in a highly tense region that is already riven with conflict. The Saudi Ministry of Media did not respond to requests for comment. Britain on Friday condemned the launch of ballistic missiles by Iran in war games conducted this week. The Foreign Office in Britain said in a statement, "These actions are a threat to regional and international security. We call on Iran to immediately cease its activities." 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the nuclear accord and reimposed crippling sanctions on Iran. Tehran has since reduced its compliance with the deal, announcing it would enrich uranium to up to 60% purity. In the past, Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has been clear that if Tehran develops a nuclear bomb, Riyadh will do as well. Crown Prince is attempting to transform Saudi Arabia from an oil-dependent nation into an economic powerhouse that is more accepted in the West. The Saudis have long been U.S. allies and enjoy a close relationship with the Trump administration. Those efforts to overhaul the country's image were tainted by the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. Meanwhile, the continued close military relationship between Saudi Arabia and China will also probably be of concern to the Biden administration as it tries to manage a complex and fraught relationship with Beijing, criticizing its human rights record while also cooperating with Chinese leaders on major global threats like climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. The White House did not immediately return requests for comment. Asked to respond to these fresh indications it was aiding Saudi Arabia's push to produce ballistic missiles, China said it has always opposed the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery and implements a strict export controls on missiles and related technologies, according to a statement from its Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He also went on to say China and Saudi Arabia are comprehensive strategic partners. Such cooperation does not violate any international law and does not involve the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Saudi Arabia has been known to have purchased missiles from China in the past, but has never built its own. The source familiar with the matter and the U.S. official confirmed. Al Jazeera headliner: U.S. Congress allows Saudi Arabia weapons sales to proceed. The U.S. Senate has blocked a resolution that would have banned a $650 million sale of missiles and missile launchers to Saudi Arabia. The sale was approved by the administration of Joe Biden in November. It is the first major arms deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia since Biden took office in January of this year. The chamber of that Tuesday, which was December 6th, voted 67 to 30 against the resolution, which represented the latest attempt by legislators to attempt to block U.S. weapon transfers to Saudi Arabia over its involvement in the continuing war in Yemen. It has been introduced by Republicans Mike Lee and Rand Paul, as well as Bernie Sanders, an independent who caucuses with Democrats. In a speech on Tuesday, Sanders said that exporting more missiles to Saudi Arabia does nothing but further the conflict and pour more gasoline on an already raging fire. A military coalition assembled by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates intervened in Yemen's conflict in 2015 in support of President Abd Rabin Mansour Hadi, internationally recognized government, shortly after the Houthis took control of the capital, Sana'a. Both sides have been accused of committing atrocities over 7 years of fighting, resulting in an estimated 233,000 deaths and 5 million people on the brink of famine. Paul said on the Senate floor that we could stop this war if we really had the will to do it. All of America should be appalled at the humanitarian disaster caused by the Saudi blockade of Yemen. The Biden administration has promised a reset of relations with Riyadh over human rights concerns and the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which U.S. intelligence linked directly to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, although Saudi officials have denied that they were involved in Khashoggi's murder. But Washington has taken a more pragmatic approach towards Riyadh, whose influence over oil markets and strategic significance in the region continues to make it a key U.S. ally. In February, Biden announced an end to support for all offensive weapons and operations by Saudi-led forces in Yemen, but pledged to continue to support the kingdom's ability to defend itself. On Tuesday, the Biden administration had said it strongly opposed the resolution to prohibit the weapons sales. Wall Street Journal reported that Riyadh is currently appealing to the U.S. and other allies to supply hundreds more Raytheon-made missiles and defense-made Patriot missiles, interceptors, and repel drones and ballistic missiles from the Houthis, attacking them, citing a dwindling supply. The Department of Defense is considering a direct sale, according to the newspaper. That's the latest news. Now my thoughts. For many who don't know how Saudi Arabia began their relationship with China, it was Saudi Arabia the only, and this is 1989, mind you, Saudi Arabia was the only Arab country that had not established diplomatic ties with the People's Republic of China. And after the Tiananmen Square protests of that year, which occurred in Beijing, Saudi relations with the People's Republic of China were upgraded. And despite the event, it was Saudi Arabia that did not provide any criticism of the event. Less than a year later, it was Prince Bandar bin Sultan, the infamous U.S. Saudi ambassador, who paid a visit to Beijing with an agreement to establish diplomatic relations. And a few days later, diplomatic relations were established in Riyadh in 1990. At this point, Saudi Arabia ended over 40 years of diplomatic ties with Taiwan, which is quite convenient. Even in January of 2006, King Abdullah was the first ever Saudi head of state to visit China. And while he was there, he signed 5 major agreements of energy cooperation and also the visit between himself and China's political leadership. They discussed broader economic trade, taxation, technical accords, and even an urban development loan for the Saudi Arabian Development Bank in China's Xinjiang province, in which President Hu exclaimed that the bilateral cooperation would write a new chapter of friendly cooperation between China and Saudi Arabia in the new century. Even though both countries are suffering under a number of human rights violations. And so during the early 2000s, between 2000 and 2005, Saudi Arabia and China enjoyed a cooperation agreement in which both would be an exporter of aluminum and oil. And during the 1990s, defense relations began with Saudi Arabia and China. And this was during when the United States refused to sell Saudi Arabia long-range fuel tanks for Saudi F-15 fighters, in which Prince Khalid bin Sultan then traveled to China to purchase ballistic missiles. And that was in 1989, the year that they began their cooperative agreement. The Chinese then began to sell Saudi Arabia ballistic missiles, intermediate ballistic missiles, range ballistic missiles. And some of them were antiques, but Saudi Arabia didn't know any better. It was not military efficient or literate. And the key point was January 15, 2012, which China and Saudi Arabia signed a deal signifying increased nuclear cooperation. The United States, which doesn't care about human rights or the abuses thereof, for they are the biggest human rights abusers of the world. And that's why their allies are corrupt governments and human rights violators like Israel and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, Bahrain, and they don't care who they sell to as long as they make a profit, as long as companies like Raytheon and Boeing and LG3 Technologies can make a buck, and they don't mind selling to Saudi Arabia, who is allegedly involved with the September 11th attacks, in which 16 of the 19 hijackers were from, or that they were behind the mass exports of international terrorism to groups like Al Qaeda, Islamic State, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf, Jaish Mohammed. They don't mind that Saudi Arabia is behind the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S. journalist. They don't mind telling former FBI agents not to defend 9/11 victims' families. For we have strong ties and diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia regarding the 9/11 operation and them suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is about U.S. interests and their lobbyists, which cater to both the Democratic and Republican parties, in which you should know by now are the biggest enemies, not just to the U.S. citizenry, but to the citizens of the world over.